Hey everyone, let's think a little bit about continuous provision because it's something that many people, unfortunately, get wrong. Which is strange because, as far as I'm concerned, continuous provision should be the very first part of any training that you have around play-based learning. But perhaps it's because, for many practitioners and many leaders, continuous provision should be something that is so ingrained that they forget to spend any time trying to consider it, especially when they're moving from one provision area to the other or from one setting to the other. And so in this video, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time thinking through the kind of considerations that need to go into designing your continuous provision, because I have been approached many times by many different organisations and many different people with requests on what I should provide in continuous provision. Now, some settings, some authorities, some trusts, some big companies, they provide resource lists. I don't choose to do that, or at least not anymore, because I recognise that there are so many individual considerations when it comes to continuous provision that you can't just simply say, I've got a 3 and 4 year old nursery, I'm going to need X, Y and Z. So if we think about the sand area first of all, imagine you are rocking up to a nursery, you've never met the children and you want to develop a sand provision area for a group of 3 and 4 year olds. The chances are you're going to think about the typical experiences children of 3 and 4 would have. And so you'll think, okay, they must have been to the beach, in which case I can put buckets and spades out. I also want them to experience things like using rakes. I might put a few sieves and colanders out. I'll put some track things out like cars and planes and trains. And I might even put a few little bits of small world out, such as maybe some sea creatures like some crabs, or I might even put out some shells and stones. Okay, those things make complete sense. I completely understand that. But imagine for a moment that you actually start on the first day in September and the group of children that you've planned for who you've not met come in and they've never been to the beach. In fact, these 3 and 4 year olds that you've planned for, the majority of them have never been to another setting before. And actually quite a few of them haven't got quite the dexterity or the fine motor control that you would like them to have in order to be able to use some of the smaller tools that you provided. Oh, in which case your continuous provision isn't matched to the children. Some of the things that you provided, such as a bucket and spades, could be good enhancements once you provided the cultural capital to support beach play, such as taking them to the beach, or perhaps even instructing them through books and videos and other media on what the beach is, and then role-playing that in the sand area. For them, what might be more useful and purposeful is having larger equipment available that they're used to interacting with. Now, I'm not necessarily sure what that would be for your learners, but for me, in my head, I'm thinking of some sort of, maybe some larger equipment like wooden spoons, metal spoons, things that they've seen in the kitchen and they've interacted with before. And actually just playing with sand is a slight difference than playing with, say, liquid at home. So using something they're already familiar with and using that as part of the continuous provision that will stay there forever, wonderful, great start. You might have some children coming to you who actually have been to the beach quite a lot of times, and actually making sandcastles is a little bit simple for the whole cohort actually. So your continuous provision might not be challenging enough. I'm thinking you've got some children in year 1 and you've got a sand area, but you're asking them to build sandcastles in the continuous provision. That's too simple. So in that case, your continuous provision should instead support your learners and perhaps having out something like different sized containers, different shapes of containers, not necessarily molds, but different containers that are perhaps opaque and transparent, different shapes and sizes, and maybe even using different sand of different textures and different viscosities, maybe some dry sand and some wet sand, to explore a little bit about texture and how to create a sandcastle and the properties and the process involved. Continuous provision, it's about meeting the children where they're at, bang, when they start. Now obviously if you've got children joining at different points in the year, you are going to have to consider this and think a little bit about going back to your continuous provision, having a slight little movement between some of these skills. So perhaps you might have buckets and spades for a bit, and then you actually might enhance it with something else. Your buckets and spades stay there, but you might get to a point where more children come in January and you take some of those enhancements out and back to your basic and continuous provision. It's really worth considering your continuous provision in all areas. So what I would suggest to you is have a little bit of time, a little moment somewhere with a piece of paper, audit your provision as best you can. Send me an email if you're struggling with this. Send me some of your ideas. I'd love to bounce some ideas off you as well, because it's something I'm fascinated by.